Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. Welcome to today's Grain Market Blast, where myself and the wonderful Angie Setzer will be providing a rapid roundup of the latest pricing flows and market moving news in agricultural markets. But before she does, I'll get the legals out of the way. So, as usual, nothing discussed on this basis session constitutes trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ or indeed the hosts, which, as you know by now, is myself, Ryan Paisley, and of course, Angie Setzer from Consus. Uh, but now I've got to try and find some. Anyone know any good jokes whilst we wait for Angie to turn up? The ones I know aren't really applicable for a Spaces event. Let's see where she is. Dun dun dun. 1 second. Here she is. Wonderful. Let's invite her to speak. Perfect. Invitation sent.
I,
Hello.
I keep saying I'm here, but you can't hear me. So I was like, I'm here. I'm
Oh,
I'm
really?
here. Yeah, no, you can hear me now. I wasn't saying it when you could hear me. Though,
I
like
was gonna-
legitimately for reasons of technology, you could not hear me prior, but I was here and I could hear you
I
talking
was
about me.
actually I was actually thinking that maybe Felix had like knocked over some more monitors or so. Oh,
Oh yeah,
Felix is a
yeah.
cat, by the way. Felix is a cat.
Felix
Before
is
he's
the
just some
cat.
random
Yes,
person.
he is a giant orange cat, and he brings with him the personality of giant orange cats. So, if you're not familiar with what that means, just surf Twitter for a while, and you'll be able to see the humans that also identify as giant orange cats. So, happy Tuesday. Sorry I'm late. Yeah, I have little legs, so it takes me a while to get here. It's another day, another dollar, another trying to figure out what the heck is going on, right, with trade and all of the things that we have. And so yesterday, we kind of saw some clarity when it came to what the heck is going on with some of these delays. We talked about it yesterday morning, right? The exemptions that had kind of shown up
Yeah.
Friday, late Friday, and everyone was like, "Wait, what? We're exempting those and they're refunding dollars? And what the heck is this? Is this a olive branch? Is this a what?" And the administration's like, no, no, no. This is just a procedural thing. So we can make sure that we're identifying this as a homeland security issue. And that, in turn will help protect. And this isn't exactly why they are doing it, but this is, part of it is if they can determine that this is a national security issue with the semiconductor, the electronic products, the pharmaceuticals is another one, then the White House can act unilaterally. The president
Yeah.
at that point cannot have Congress really come in and say, hey, you're not supposed to do that, checks and balances. And right now, after having seen even Grassley come out and start to question whether or not he is able to do the reciprocals and some of these other things, this is just one of those deals where they had already said that they were going to put these out. They had already said that they were basically an issue of national security.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this is where we stand. That's just kind of update one. Though they did say that 270 days. The investigation can last up to 270 days, though most folks expect it to be done much sooner. And it's currently being done into the semiconductor side of things and into pharmaceuticals. So that's step one. We have more tariffs coming. We just don't know on who or at what level or when. And so that's fun. But we are seeing more in the way of negotiations, right? Officials from Japan are expected to arrive to DC this week. We also had President or Vice President, excuse me, JD Vance tell reporters, great things about how confident he is about the
Yeah.
negotiations with the UK. We love the royal family over here.
Yes.
And we're just in line. So many things you do. It's almost like we came from that country or something. I don't know. But anyway,
Well,
that's
I'm not going to say that you'd be better off still under our hill, but
right. That's maybe this is how Canada will feel about. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But there is really this push right now where it's like, listen, the administration needs a win. Like people that are rooting for the administration really could use a win. We need some
yeah,
sort
right.
of trade deal. They keep telling us we're on the cusp of one. We've got 130 countries that we're currently negotiating with. That number basically kind of doubled over the weekend, which is awesome. But we just need to figure something out, especially because Xi is basically making his own, world tour, at the very least,
Yeah,
Southeast Asia tour. He is in Vietnam today, just arrived. Everyone's super excited. They have a ton of trade that goes back and forth. Part of, how China was able to maybe avoid some of the original tariffs in the first round of the trade war was to, or at least companies, I'm not going to say China, but to, kind of push that through Vietnam and have it come this way. We had seen that, Vietnam had said that they would roll back all of their tariffs. They wanted to come up with something with the US. We hadn't necessarily seen anything yet. And so Xi is there, and he is planning to travel to Cambodia and Malaysia as well, which is interesting because there were like 10 countries, Southeast Asian nations, Malaysia, Cambodia, Vietnam, and a handful of others that really were positive, or at least maybe positive is the right word, but they came out, almost together, very eager to negotiate with the administration. And so obviously,
yeah.
right now we have kind of a, it's like you have a friend group, and the two main leaders of the friend group have gotten into a spat, and now everyone is trying to determine if we're going to be friends with Brittany or Heather. And
Yeah,
so
do you know what? Funny
pick
you should say it, because the way I was thinking of it is like almost like when you're on a group chat with your friends and you're like, hang on a second, is there another group chat that I'm not in?
Right? Oh, I always think that I know that there's group chats I'm not in. And they're all talking about how annoying I am, right? Like and that's totally
Never,
understandable.
never.
But yeah, so we were watching, we have this sort of like we're courting each other, we're trying to come up with trade, and to be completely honest, like it's a harebrained scheme, but we are rewriting a lot of trade relationships or in the
Yeah.
process of doing it. And it's crazy, but it could work. So we'll see
I
what
gotta say,
happens.
so just whilst we're speaking about China, the possibly the best quote from a government official that I've ever seen was a Chinese senior official for Hong Kong affairs, very early this morning, late night US time, and I promise you, this is a pure quote.
Yes.
Let those peasants in the US well in front of the 5,000 years of Chinese civilization. There you go,
That's
peasants.
nice. That's peasants. I don't feel very peasanty, but I'm okay with that. I like the dresses, so maybe it'll work. But speaking of China, right, they're actively work that trade group. We're on the subject, but they did announce that the state-run airlines are not allowed to purchase Boeing jets
Yes, yeah,
anymore.
yeah,
So we are seeing little things, like I've been saying to a lot of my customers, is like we only export so much in the U.S. Most of it is services, right? We've got agricultural commodities, energy, and jets, military things, like stuff like that. Like, and that's one of the deals where China's like, hey, no more Boeing jets, just as a continued response. And so we'll
yeah,
see, what happens there. Lots of trade talk, lots of things happening. Talk of a delay in the auto tariffs as well. Leaders from the big three have been pushing that. I'm in Michigan, so I'm just outside of Lansing, where Cadillac and Oldsmobile. I mean, we have Oldsmobile Highway here. You may not remember Oldsmobile, but that was there was the anyway. It's a car brand that used to exist before the 2008 anyway. But we're car people. We have Whitmer as our governor. She is definitely arguing for these types of delays. And so there is some talk that we could see exemptions, small pieces, kind of like those de minimis. Did I say that right? The
yeah,
$800 or less,
yep,
something of that regard, where it's like, oh, this is, well, you don't make cigarette lighters in cars anymore, but this only costs $50. It doesn't get charged the tariff or something like that. There's some
yes,
talk of that, and that'll be interesting to see. And honestly, it'll work out in the end, right? We'll all get there, but gosh darn, it has to be a pain in the neck for most anyone
yeah,
trying to figure out how to function. Second thing, outside of trade and all of that, even though it obviously involves trade to a certain extent, we did see day one, first official day of Argentina's currency float, and saw basically the currency go, official currency go from about 800 pesos per dollar to around 1179, just under 1200 pesos per dollar. Pretty extreme. From a devaluation standpoint, there were a lot of thoughts we would see farmers really kind of push to be aggressive sellers because, not only have they had the export tax reduction come into play, which Milei is saying, get in now, it's going away the end of June, and some of these other things, but now they're seeing this devaluation of their currency. Saw a bit of an increase in value, you could say, or at least an increase in
yeah,
value of what their crops are worth in peso form yesterday. And so, surprising though, farmer selling has been some of the slowest up until the first part of April that we've seen in 15 plus years. So that's been of interest in and of itself. There wasn't much in the way of a big push in farmer selling yesterday, even, which, some are saying it's because of the delayed harvest. We've had some slower start to harvest in Argentina, a lot of heavy rain. And the thing with soybeans, if soybeans are ready and they get a ton of heavy rain, it has to be a lot. It's not something that just happens. It's not, overnight or whatever. But if you have several weeks of heavy rain, you can cause quality issues. You can start to lose yield, and some of these other things. And we had seen similar sort of circumstances happen during Brazil's harvest. And soybeans are just so difficult. If you can't get them to dry down, they're squishy. It's just, they're a pain in the neck. And so there's been some issues that farmers have had with it being way too wet. They're worried about what production will look like. There's a lot of thought that they have a decent bean crop, but their corn crop was a lot smaller than what was anticipated in the beginning, though there's some arguments that maybe it's larger, so where there's a back and forth. But in the end, it's one of those things that I've been talking about for a while here that is of interest simply because, we've seen it in Brazil and some other places as well. Just because there's bushels on paper doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work its way into the pipeline. So we'll be closely watching, what's happening in Argentina and if there's a push of farmers selling here over the next 10 weeks basically before the end of their export tax as they harvest and things like that. We should see it, but they're still not competitive for corn into the summer months. They're basically in line with where Brazil is at. And we're seeing it this week. We've seen 2 different flash sales announced of corn exports into the world market. And so that stuff's kind of important to be paying attention to and watching. Otherwise, just to kind of wrap her up, wheat and corn inspections were well above pre-report expectations yesterday. We're continuing to see, big shipments. Some of that may be tariff and port fee related, where it's like, hurry up, get the shit on the boat. Let's get it out of here. But, for the most part, we are waiting too. We're about 2 days away from the updated port fee proposal, which means we should start to hear more about leaks and people seeing the document today, tomorrow,
Yeah.
something like that. So that should help. We need confirmation that ag exports will not be hit by these fees before anyone will really feel comfortable booking deferred trades. Tariffs, and I've argued that for a long time. The tariffs are really something that is workable, is manageable, as long as they're not 185,000% or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
25% tariffs into the EU or whatever. It's going to hurt, but it's something that
But it's manageable. Yeah.
yeah, parties can absorb. So we'll see
Yeah.
what that means. We'll see all, what the port fee looks like and yada yada yada. But beyond
So
that,
just a
yeah, go
quick one,
ahead.
because I know we were speaking of Bolsonaro previously when he was going in. I think it was his brain off or whatever it was.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
obviously, but he's back in ICU again. I saw
Oh gosh, I
yesterday.
didn't know that. That's all
Yeah, yeah.
right.
So
Well,
because we put, well, I say the PIQ elves posted the headline yesterday, and I wondered why my notifications was blowing up, and obviously basically like, everyone in South America was basically quoting the tweet, basically saying, "Oh, he's back in his happy place."
he's back
So
in
it
his
seems
happy
like,
place.
yeah,
Oh, it's
because
so
he seems to
terrible.
spend a lot of time in hospital. So I don't know if
Yes.
that's something we should be keeping an eye on, just because what happens if the worst should happen, or no, I
Yeah.
don't know. It's just, but it seems like another unknown and another kind of something else to kind of worry about.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think you have to include that, because the leadership of our, friends and foes around the world, especially when it comes to our agricultural powerhouses and some of the things that we're
Yeah,
seeing with, negotiations and the inflation in Brazil, and the currency had
yeah.
collapsed there for a while, and so many things, and it all goes down to factors that influence off farm movement.
Oh,
Um,
well put.
and that is where we're at. That's another factor that will influence off farm movement. If you have an uncertainty over what your currency is going to do, if you're not sure what your tax rate is going to look like, some of these other things, it's really going to
Yeah.
influence farmer sentiment, farmer movement, farmer confidence. And yeah, it's just all stuff to watch. Thank
Just throw
God.
it in the mix.
Yeah, just mix it in. Like that's at this point in time, I've lost count of which nations are currently in transition of leadership. and
Yeah.
which ones have arrested their opposition that they describe
Can the
as
country with the stable government please stand up?
right. That's it. At this point, it's like Mexico, and that is
Yeah,
something that
no,
is
you're right.
saying
To be
something.
fair, yeah, no, do you know what? You're absolutely right. It's like because they played a blinder during the tariffs, they were really proactive.
Yeah.
They seem to have their act together. It's
So what happens
what a
when you
crazy
have
world we live in.
a woman who is an engineer in power? I won't say it as not gender necessarily, but engineer based or something like that. I think it's thought you're thinking of your moves ahead of time, not
Yeah,
trying to blow
be
smoke or
be more Scheinbaum.
Yes, well, at least that's my
Oh no,
inner monologue.
absolutely. Sign me
I
up,
like her.
absolutely.
So, but yeah, we'll see. Canada's going to provide temporary 6-month relief from counter tariffs for goods imported from the US that are used in manufacturing, processing, and food and beverage packaging. That just came out.
There you go. There you go. Right,
So we'll
absolute
see what that
value
means.
on the podcast.
We'll see. We'll see what today brings. But yeah, good luck to everyone. Happy Tuesday, and don't drown in too many headlines.
Yeah, on that very low bar, just don't drown.
Right? Just keep your head
Angie,
above.
yeah, exactly. Angie, thank you so much. You are wonderful as always. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in, and especially our regular ones. We really do appreciate you. I know I keep saying that, but we really do. And yeah, we'll see you all tomorrow. Goodbye.
See you tomorrow. Have a good one.